Thank you for listening to the BJJ Brick Podcast. We'll be bringing you Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and good times. We hope to help you get the most out of your grappling ability and meet your goals both on and off the mat.
Welcome back, my friends, to the BJJ Brick Podcast. This is episode 368. We'll be talking about the art of war today. I'm here with my good buddies Byron and Gary. How you guys doing this morning?
We're doing great. We both got a little time on the mats and excited to record again this time around.
Good.
Yep.
Hey, we don't have our friend Stephen with us this morning, but he wrote a few books, Stephen King, and he said the scariest moment is always just before you start. And man, I think that's true in so many aspects of jiu-jitsu. Of course, we can talk about, your first class, your first tournament. I mean, there's a ton of firsts in jiu-jitsu. And so I think if you do jiu-jitsu, you know a little something about that, those scary moments. And that's a great thing about jiu-jitsu is it helps us learn to overcome those moments, because we're going to have those moments in life as well. You buy your first house, you get a new job, a new relationship, whatever it is. The scariest moment's always right before you start. So there you go, guys. There's one of the great benefits of jiu-jitsu. Yep.
That quote just fit perfect today. I had a coworker do jiu-jitsu for the first time today, just started. It had to be a little scary. And, I know we've talked about starting jiu-jitsu before. And, I took some of Byron's advice, offered to pick him up and see if he wanted to a ride, make it a little bit easier. But no, he said he'd meet me there. So I made sure I showed up early, well before I normally get there, and waited out in the parking lot. But it's a tough time starting, and we're here to grow jiu-jitsu, and the little things we can do to make it easier for people to start jiu-jitsu is just going to pay big dividends down the road. But I'm proud of them starting. It's a tough thing. It's scary to step on that mat. It's scary to start a new job. It's scary to start a new relationship, whatever we're doing. But we're going to get through it. We're resilient people, and jiu-jitsu is going to teach us a lot of lessons that we can use in life.
Something to keep in mind, Gary, I'm glad you brought up that story about bringing your friend to class today, because you didn't go into everything you told Byron and I, but man, you did a really good job of being a good friend. And I'm thinking about when we see other people that are new to class, it's their first time or they're going to their first competition, the role that we can play in helping them get over that cannot be overstated. So, if you see a new person in class, do everything you can to make them feel welcome and make them feel comfortable.
I love it, Joe. Yeah. And, I know I've told my story numerous times that, the first time I went, I drove past the place and, didn't show up that day. I got a little nervous and, turned around. And I guarantee if I had somebody waiting for me or picking me up, like, Byron said before, it would have been a lot easier to go in. And, I'm just lucky that, I tried it again and finally had the guts to step through that door, because here we are. I don't know how many years I've been training, but, 16, 17, 18 years, I don't know. But I'm glad I did, because I've had a heck of a journey.
I like how this quote's from Stephen King. Like, he knows how to paint a picture in your mind and how to set a scary scene. And I think one of the aspects behind this is the unknown. And that's why it's scary. Like, it's not scary to go to your second class. It's not scary to do something you've done a bunch of times. Like your first day at work or your first day at school, that's kind of nervous time, But after you've gone, it's like, oh, okay, I've been here before. I've done this. It's like a lot of that nerve just goes away. And just like the idea that your mind will just throw all these what ifs happen. What if this happens? What's going to happen? What's this going to be like? Am I going to a fight club here? Or what's all these things are going to pop in your head, making that first day probably one of the most intimidating or scary times of your jiu-jitsu career. And if like what Gary has done, and Joe and myself, for many people, is just try to take that away. Just try to explain what it's going to be like. Try to be there for the person, introduce them to the people, and just take away that fear. And you know what? There's a podcast. You could be listening and thinking, I want to train jiu-jitsu, but it's hard to get through that door. And the one big thing I always say to people is the person running that gym is running a business. They're not running a fight club. They want customers. They want to service a customer. They want to teach people martial art, which is jiu-jitsu, and they want to do that effectively. And you don't do that by being mean to people. You don't do that by treating them badly. You do that by teaching them by teaching them the best you can and treating them like a professional and running a good school. And there are more good schools now than ever. And it's just growing that way. And if one school, if you go in and it doesn't go super well, check out another one, and you'll find one that fits you. But I do think that Stephen King, being the author of that quote, it just goes to show you that your mind will toy with you and mess with you. And that's perfectly normal. But just know that fear of the unknown, you're probably blowing that out of proportion. Not the only author we're going to talk about today. I've got an audiobook, guys.
Yeah, when I think of my two favorite authors, Stephen King and Byron Jabara.
Yeah, mine is Paul Kinzia, though. So, sorry, guys.
Oh, nice. We have a audiobook called Your First Year of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. There's a link to the shop on bjbrick.com in the show notes, or just go to bjbrick.com and you can find it there. And it's $11.99, and really I want to walk you through that first year of grappling, and it's about 2.5 hours long. It's a lot like a podcast, but it's just me just kind of going through finding the right gym, your first month, techniques you could focus on, and that sort of thing. Like I got a buddy that just started just recently, and he spent the first 2 weeks on leg locks, and the second week was on heel hooks. And I'm telling him, like, hey, let me show you this escape. Let me do it. Like, he knows that the class isn't necessarily designed for beginners, the class that we're going to, but he's learning a lot during that portion, and then he's learning a lot after class, and we run over questions, and the teammates are helping him a ton. And it's just hard. Like, if he would have thought that heel hooks were going to be like the bread and butter of his first month of jiu-jitsu, that's a mistake. That's not what he's working on his escapes most of the time, and creating some space and framing and that sort of thing. And I can't be there for everyone out there who's starting their first year, but I think this book will help you out a lot. Check it out. It's in the show notes. It's $11.99. The money goes and helps support the podcast, which is listener supported.
And if you're not in your first year at BJJ, you can always buy it from somebody else. We always talk about how you can make it easier for other people to get started. That would be a great way. Your first year is filled with many scary firsts, and maybe this book would help somebody out.
It's a super scary book. No, but that quote from Stephen King, it would fit nicely in the book at the beginning, as far as like this. It's okay if this makes you a little nervous. It's the unknown that you're worried about. So we're dipping our toe into this unknown of a podcast episode, and we'll see how it goes, how you guys like it. And we might do more of these, but it's been a while. I studied the art of war, and I was going to do an audio book, just like the first year of jiu-jitsu, and it was going to be on the art of war for jiu-jitsu. And things happen, and the show and that sort of thing, and it kind of got put on the back burner. And I'm looking at it, and I keep wanting to do it, and it's just hard to get it going. I'm working on this Kimura episode still, and that's really coming to fruition now. And I'm like, I'm never going to get this Art of War thing done. So why not run through this with you guys? So the first chapter of Art of War is about laying plans, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And I just want to give a little intro. I'm sure most people have heard of The Art of War as a book. It's really an ancient Chinese military tactics from about 5th century BC. And there's a little question whether the author is Sun Tzu, a little question of whether that person even existed. And the book was first told like verbally. It wasn't even written down. And so there was some passing down through that, and eventually it was written down. And the version that we're going off of was translated into English by a guy named Lionel Giles in 1910. And so that was a little while ago, over 110 years ago. And so if you want to read the book, it's public domain. And we'll be talking about the first chapter today. It's not long. I mean, how long is the first chapter, guys? It's probably 4 or 5 pages at most.
Yeah. The whole book is, well, it depends on how large the pages are, but less than 100 pages, right? 60, 70 pages?
Maybe. And a lot of times you'll read it with a translation next to it. So you're kind of reading 2 books in one. You'll read a paragraph, and then somebody else will say what this probably means. And you could, there's a lot of art of wars that have theme. You know, the art of war for marketing, the art of war for banking, or for tennis. I don't know. There's a ton of them. And Jiu-Jitsu was going to be the one I would do, but we're doing it today. Starting it anyway. And we'll bring up some of these themes, and we'll just throw them on the mat and see if Joe and Gary and myself could throw them in a triangle and see if they relate to Jiu-Jitsu. So with that all being said, the chapter 1 is really about it's titled Laying Plans, and the first thing is the game plan. And Jiu-Jitsu is often called human chess, and we've all heard that. If you've trained any amount of time, you've heard that, and you think of BJJ as a controlling game that it leads to submitting your opponent, and that's where the battle of chess is. But really, strategy starts much earlier with that. It starts with your training, it starts with your instructors, it starts with what you decide to study. You have to choose a path. And that's where your strategy comes in. So what kind of a path, what kind of a martial artist do you decide to be? And your opinion, guys, this happens naturally no matter what. You gravitate towards certain techniques, but also you might think, oh, this technique would work really well with this. Or you might have a coach or a teammate say, hey, you're good at this technique. This one is going to be a really nice complement with that one. And so you kind of mold your path in that way. Do you guys know many grapplers who sit down and they kind of make a game plan about how their jiu-jitsu is going to match up with their techniques and how they're going to piece it together like a puzzle?
I think most of the people I know have done that at some point. I don't know if they would all say they did it as early as they would like to have, and I don't think everybody does it as consistently as they should. But it seems like the circle of people I hang out with, that's not uncommon. I did want to comment on something you said, though, Byron, is you said that things kind of come together on their own if you don't take the initiative to do it. But that often ends up leading people down the wrong path.
Sure.
I used to tell my kids when they were little, make friends on purpose. Think about the kids, the type of kids you want to be friends with, and make friends with them. Don't go to a new school or join a new football team or basketball team and just decide you're going to be buddies with the first kid that comes up and talks to you. That's fairly common for kids, but man, you're so much better off if you make friends on purpose. And the same is true with choosing a school, choosing the people that you train with, and choosing your path in jiu-jitsu. It will happen on its own, and eventually it will probably sort itself out, but you'll be a lot further off if early on you take control of the journey yourself.
I like that one, Joe. And that's good advice, is make friends on purpose. And as you were saying that, I'm reflecting about myself as a kid. And it's like, yeah, oftentimes I'd just make buddies with the kid who's sitting next to me. And he's over there, I don't know, sniffing the markers or the glue or something. It's like, that's my buddy. Well, maybe not. Maybe I should find another friend that isn't going to kind of bring that over to where I'm at. But the Art of War talks about this pathway a little bit, and you could think of it like, do you want to be a guard player? Do you want to be a leg lock specialist? Maybe even more detailed, like a leg lock specialist that trains in straight ankle locks, or maybe you're more of a scrambler type of a fighter where you kind of create a lot of scrambling situations, or maybe you want to be like a controlling type of grappler to where there aren't any scrambles and it's a very tight grappling exchange. And that you would think of this as like all those different styles, they're drastically different. And there's different warriors, and like somebody could have a spear or a sword or archery, cavalry, and all this other stuff. There's so many different little paths to choose. They're all valid, but and maybe that just matches up a little bit naturally with your style. If you're if you're a really aggressive person, maybe the scrambler, maybe the kind of the more wild player is cool. But if you're more of a calm and methodical person, maybe that controlling style of jiu-jitsu is more for you.
I like that, Byron. I never really thought about this, where this is like choosing your weapons. Are we going to use a sword or a spear? Hey, I'm going to be a leg lock guy, or I'm going to be a control. Work on control. Just dominate you, break your spirit that way. That's kind of a cool analogy. I never really thought about a fight, a grappling match like that. Kind of neat.
Yeah, and we're looking at some. Go ahead.
I do think though too, like you may be a leg lock specialist, but I think we all evolve where you may really want to, let's say, go down that path, but I still think the one thing that is probably the most important is that control part. And, I do think of a good grappler, a good jiu-jitsu fighter will be a good, even if he's a really good leg lock specialist, to get better, he's going to have to take time and work on that control, to take time to work on the scrambling, to be a guard player, because you're going to get put in all sorts of positions, and maybe you're going to go against somebody who can keep out of leg locks, clear the knee line all the time, just stay out of trouble, and you better have another game that you're good at, or you could be in trouble.
So we're all, I don't know if you guys are looking at the notes. I sent some notes to you guys about chapter 1, and I don't want to just read through all these, but if you guys want to jump into any of these, that'd be great too. But something I have about choosing your path or your strategy, like what to do, is the thought of, do you have access to that part of your game? And if you, like an example here, if you want to be a pressure passer, but your takedowns kind of suck, that could be an issue. Maybe all of your opponents always pull guard. Maybe it's the weight class where it's predictable, everyone's going to pull guard but you, so your pressure passing is fine even with poor takedowns. That could be a thing. Or maybe you have a sweep game that could put you on top to do your pressure passing. But you want to have, and those are just examples, all these, but you want to have access to your strategy.
Yeah, I like that. Byron, I like that you speak of funneling quite a bit, and I think those two things kind of go hand in hand. If you find that you have decent back attacks and you like to play that, then your game should always be your scrambles, your positional transitions. You should always be looking to get to the back. And like you said, if you like playing top game, then you need to work on your takedowns, get some sweeps and some reversals. So good point.
Yeah, I like how you put sweeps in there, because I was going to bring that up. I didn't see it in your notes at first, but, even without great takedowns, I do see a lot of people get taken down and just have incredible sweeps and just end up on top. Or, you may not have great takedowns, but your defense is really good. You got a really strong sprawl, so, you go front headlock to a go behind, and next thing you know, you got the back and you're in an advantageous position.
Yeah, and you talk about getting in that advantageous position is the idea that will this game plan work out well for you, And the example I have here is ankle locks. Let's just talk about that. Like, it could be sub it in for any submission or any game plan, but if the person you're trying to ankle lock, and it could be your teammate, or it could be somebody at a competition or whatever, it's a person you're working with, if they're routinely defending ankle locks from people who are like more proficient than you at them, it's not going to go well. If you could push that skill gap or that knowledge gap about ankle locks and get better at them, imagine being a blue belt, but your straight ankle lock is at the brown belt level. That's going to go pretty good for you. And now take this to the next step is gaining access to your game. Imagine being that blue belt. You have a brown belt level ankle lock, and you can get to that ankle lock from basically any position. They could from top, from bottom, from every different type of guard pass they attempt, from several sweep setups, and like you could do it off of a takedown. You could, like if you have access to that position from many spots, and it's several levels higher, like that brown belt level ankle lock, and you're just that blue belt. I don't mean to say just a blue belt, but you're a blue belt level. It's going to be really tough for any blue belts to have a good day against you grappling there. Does that kind of drive home the message of getting access to your game plan and then also making that one of your best tools?
Yeah, I love your analogies earlier, and as you're talking about, getting better at leg locks, you're drilling them, you're controlling that knee line, you're controlling the hip. It reminds me of like you're talking about picking a weapon. Maybe I picked a weapon with a high capacity magazine. Maybe I picked a longer sword or, with better, metal in it. I like it. It's, I didn't know where you were going to go with all this stuff, but this is cool.
Yeah. But, to have access to that, like if you're the swordsman and you're standing
you
there,
gotta practice.
And the guy with if an archer is 200 meters away, you don't have access to be a good swordsman at that time. Like the whole thing failed. You definitely need a shield to even get up there, but like you need to be able to get your system into the game as quickly as possible.
But you can have the best sword, you can have the best horse, but you need to practice. I think that's the biggest key right there. And, I think I brought this up before about my kid and his buddies getting into a little fight with some other kids down the street. And my son's best friend said he had a secret weapon, when he was getting ready to fight this guy that nobody could defend. It was a little trip, and he thought he was going to trip the guy, and it was going to be over. Like he had done it a couple times to his little sister, and it worked. Well, he tried to do it to this guy. It did not work, and he ended up getting his glasses and nose broken. And, so you have to work. I could care less how great your weapons are. You have to put the time in. Start with the basics, just get really, really good. Just keep cementing, and doing them over and over again against people that aren't as good as you, people that are same as you, and people that are better than you. And then hopefully you'll end up being like that blue belt that has brown or black belt level leg locks.
Well said, Kerry. So we started this kind of thing about talking about the human game of chess, and I just want to stress one more time, it doesn't start when the referee says go. It starts with your training decisions. It starts with adding strategy to your jiu-jitsu. If you're collecting techniques and they're fitting appropriately in your game, that's human chess. And I'm just reminded of Bruce Lee's quote, I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. And that's clearly Bruce Lee advocating for having focus and direction in your training. So we're not reading The Art of War in this in the podcast version of this. So, but paragraph 13, it talks about the general, and I thought this is perfect for the instructor and the gym, and he talks about the ability of the general, and many people think that the best instructor is the person who is best at jiu-jitsu. And I think we could all agree that that's not necessarily true. Much like the best warrior on the field, you probably wouldn't just want to switch them out with the general. Yeah.
The best coaches were not always the best athletes in every sport, and then oftentimes the coaches that really nerd out on the X's and O's are oftentimes not the best that motivate. If you've got an opportunity to go to a gym that's big enough to have several coaches, you probably have a real advantage there if they have a well-balanced group of coaches. Maybe one's a great athlete, maybe one is a great motivator that really connects well with the students, and maybe one of them is really good with all the technical aspects. If that's not the case, I think you just try and find a coach and a team that fits you. That's kind of the way I read this part, not looking to give anybody advice on how to run a school or how to coach a class, but from a student's perspective, it's really smart to look at the school and see how it's run, see how the classes are coached, and see if it fits up with your goals.
Yeah, that ability to motivate is a big factor with coaches. Listening and observation skills, that's a big one with a coach. Like, are they taking in what's going on with you, with the entire class, with the gym environment, and making changes where needed? If you've got a mat bully and he's just going around, he or she just going around kind of ruining everybody's grappling experience and not helping anybody, they're just selfish, they're just kind of just being what a mat bully is, I guess. I don't need to explain that anymore. And coach doesn't even know this, let alone addressing it. That's a failure of coaching. Coach also needs to be able to give that great feedback that we want, that honest, relevant feedback. That's a super learning tool, and great coaches and instructors give that feedback to their students, and in a way that's well received. Not insulting, not you don't want to degrade somebody as you give them advice. You need to do that, and a couple of others, high level of knowledge about the topic at hand, which for us is jiu-jitsu, and that could break down with not just technique, but experience with competing, experience with getting fit and diet and that sort of thing. That could all be part of the pie as well, as I talk about diet and pie. So yeah, there's a lot that would go into making a good coach. And Joe, I think you're right on. You can get different parts of coaching from different people at the school. It doesn't need to just be one person. It could be the team. So Sun Tzu, this is like a military text. So he talks about discipline and it being forced. And discipline back then was pretty severe. And it talked about there's like a side story of this time frame, and there was a guy whose horse strayed off onto somebody else's property and ate some of the grass, and that person was beheaded. Like, the strictest discipline. And of course, we're not advocating that. If you walk on the mat with your shoes, we don't advocate beheadings. But what discipline really means is that people abide by the rules. And Gary, whether somebody is a competitor, whether they're a hobbyist, whether they're a coach or a black belt or a white belt, we all kind of have the same rules. And it helps a team if we all play on the same rules. Do you agree to that?
Yes, definitely.
And it's nice that the coach enforces that, but it's often done by teammates as well. I don't know. I remember I was grappling with a guy, and he was being really aggressive, and he must have been fairly new to the team, and I was like, well, I started to tap him out, a couple times down the road, 3 turns into 4, and he gets frustrated, and he's like, he yells, "I can't believe it," or something like that. And I probably wasn't doing the right thing, but I was just trying to deal with this person who was giving me a problem, I guess, or an issue, and maybe it was the mat play. I can't remember how it really went, but I do remember this. One of my teammates looked at him and said, "Don't cry over getting tapped out by a black belt. We all do it." And it's just like, he just shut up. And it's like, everybody gets tapped out in this all the time. Like, that's just part of training. And maybe that wasn't the most nice thing to say to somebody, and I probably could have been doing something differently as well. But that was a part where this guy was, like, in jiu-jitsu, people aren't, verbally airing their frustrations and yelling things about, oh, that sucked. I can't believe you got me with that. And like, no, it's a pretty laid back thing. And you might be thinking, oh man, that wasn't a good roll for me, or that went really bad, or that he was lucky on that. You can think that too, but we don't verbalize these things. And he was yelling it, and a teammate just kind of put him in place and was like, hey, quit crying about it. We're training, and this is a hard sport. You got tapped out by a black belt a few times. So welcome to the club. So, and that's like part of my idea of like discipline is being enforced sometimes by the teammates that like they're there to help keep people in check sometimes. And,
Byron,
yeah,
I have a question on that. Is that person come back?
I remember who said it to the guy, but I don't even remember who it was. I mean, it was just, I don't know. And he might be one of my most enjoyable training partners, or maybe I never saw him again that day. But I remember who called him out on being kind of a big complainer at the gym. I probably would not treat that person the same way. I probably would tell them, hey, let's slow down or this, whatever. But I don't know, maybe that's just the vibe I got, is like some people, it's like, I'm going to just take it to them and work them a little bit. And I did that. And he didn't, I don't know. I don't know, Carrie. I wouldn't be surprised if I ran him off that day. And I feel bad about that. But I'm trying to grow here and learn and do better in the future. So the conversation will be better than the beating. I always advocate that.
Yeah. That's what I was just curious. It goes both ways, because you're talking about, we're talking about discipline. We need the team to follow the rules. One bad apple can spoil, a whole gym. But, that also goes back to our goal is to grow jiu-jitsu. Maybe there was another way to keep that person rolling, if they're still rolling. I was just curious if that person was still rolling or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
That's a tough one, right?
Yeah. But the person who called him out on it is still a valued teammate.
Yeah.
And maybe he was just jumping in to kind of relieve a little bit of pressure and just kind of cool the situation down. I don't remember being particularly mad at the person or frustrated, but maybe it's uncharacteristic for me to just tap somebody out 4 times in a couple minutes. And as they get more and more frustrated, that's not usually what I would do. So maybe I was a little bit past being a cool and calm and collected person as well.
Was this in the adults class or kids class?
It was in the kids class. You only train in the kids class.
I was wondering how you tap somebody out 4 times in a round.
Oh, well, it was a longer round than most anyway.
Oh, good for you.
But this discipline, we're kind of under the category of the general, aka the instructor. And discipline ultimately lies there. And then there's an interesting quote here from The Art of War. Without constant practice, and this is Giles's interpretation, but without constant practice, the officers will be nervous and undecided when mustering for battle. Without constant practice, the general will be wavering and irresolute when the crisis is at hand. So he was advocating for constant practice, that it breeds confidence and renders good decision making with quick speed. All this, thousands of years ago, talking about practice, having a highly trained army.
Yep. I mean, yeah, just like what we were talking about earlier with the leg locks, you need to cement it. You need to drill. I like that point you brought up. Practice breeds confidence, muscle memory. We're going to know what to do. We're not going to have to, our thinking's not going to become muddled. It's just going to happen. We're going to make these decisions at quick speed, very fast. But, practice is a key. I've seen so many people who tell me they want to start jiu-jitsu, and they did jiu-jitsu 7 years ago, and, they come back and they're frustrated because they're not what they were 7 years ago. It's because you haven't practiced. It's something that'll come, but you need to get in that room. You need to put in the reps, and it'll come. It's without practice. It's the art is nothing. We need to put it in play.
Yeah, I like that quote, and what I really like about it is it says that the officers will be nervous and undecided when mustering for battle, and that the general will be wavering when the crisis is at hand. And I think that's a really good thing to remember is if you're not putting in enough practice, it might not be readily apparent to you because at practice things are going just fine. You have no problem executing your technique in practice. But if you're preparing for a tournament, when you get on that mat and the game's on the line, man, the adrenaline level's so much higher, the stress level's so much higher, the intensity is so much higher. That's when it will become apparent whether or not you put in the necessary practice.
Yeah. And I have here this little note that, practice breeds confidence. Practice renders good decision-making at a quick speed. And then all the way in Chapter 7 of The Art of War, line 21, Sun Tzu says, ponder and deliberate before you make a move. I'm like, okay, that's kind of not what he's talking about, being quick at speed and just making those decisions. And really, the two are compatible. You train and plan before you compete. So you don't have to really ponder and deliberate your actions while in the heat of the moment. The two actually complement each other pretty well there. So we've covered, we're in Chapter 1, the game plan. We just kind of wrapped up with the general, which is really your coach or your instructor. And now we're moving towards changing plans. And we're near paragraph 17, not chapter, paragraph 17 in Chapter 1, if you're following along in your books, which I don't expect you to be. But here we'll talk about how it's important, of course, to have a game plan. But it's odd to start out with the idea that you may have to change your game plan. But this happens all the time in jiu-jitsu. That's why we're rolling. Like, Gary has a game plan. He's gonna put me in this particular foot lock. It'll probably take about 45 seconds if it's a good day for me. But he may end up with a different one. He may end up there in a different route. He's altering parts of his plan because the old classic thing is your game plan doesn't survive first contact with the enemy. I have a game plan that's in play too, and you're going to have to alter it. We're not advocating you throw it out the window and just go crazy, but being able to have a game plan that's adaptable is an important thing.
I've seen a couple of friends recently get their first chance at a big tournament, like a fight to win kind of thing. And more than once recently, I've seen guys go out. I've talked to them beforehand. They know a little bit about their opponent, and they're sure they know what to expect, and they sort of have a game plan based around that. And then the other guy comes out and doesn't do at all what they were expecting. I saw one of my friends went out going up against a wrestler, both heavyweights. And they spent the whole time just sort of pushing each other around on their feet. And largely, my friend thought for sure the guy was going to shoot for a double leg. And he had all of these counters and moves based off defending that. And it just never happened. And watching it, it's pretty obvious to you. I'm watching. I'm like, just pull guard. Do something. Get the fight to the ground. But, of course, when you're in the heat of battle, it's not quite so easy to see clearly. But, yeah, after watching those matches, that really got me to thinking about having the ability to change a game plan on the fly.
Yeah, and Sun Tzu says, according as circumstances are favorable, one should modify one's plans. It's just because my game plan is to, work for a takedown. If I tie up with somebody, I always say that, like, I could tell when I tie up with somebody if they're likely just to take me down within 45 seconds. Like, you have that feel like this person has legitimate stand-up ability with the way that they're grabbing your head, they're tying up with you. Why give them the 2 points? So modify your plan, so that might be part of it. And the cool thing is, like I was saying, this is happening all the time when you're training. You're constantly modifying your plan.
Yeah, so I've heard two methods of game planning, and I think they both have value. And one of them is kind of envisioning how you'd like to see the fight go from start to finish, and kind of game planning as how to keep it on that path. If it gets off that path, how to get it back on that path. But the other methodology I've heard of game planning, I really like this one, is to have a plan for every situation that you might find yourself in. So you're worried less about how the fight's going to go from start to finish, but I want to have an answer for when I go out expecting a takedown from the other guy and he doesn't, and that's not what happens. I need to have a second option. You know, I may not want to play guard, but I need to have a plan from every guard position in case I end up facing a guy that's got a good top game and I just can't get off my back. So I think if you do that, if you have a plan for every situation you might find yourself in, that'll really help you change directions if needed. Yeah.
That's that. And if you think about like a tournament setting, you're going to match up with a lot of different people. That's part of the big puzzle of a tournament. Is you could be matched up with an aggressive guard player. Next round, it's an elite wrestler. Next round, it's a guy who's trying to eke out a victory by a point or two, or somebody who's got a new tricky guard system. This is all in one day. And it's nice to be able to get that game plan that will just fit in with everybody and key in on that. But like Sun Tzu said at the beginning of this little section here, according as circumstances are favorable, one should modify one's plans. Just have that kind of in your pocket. And as you take your game plan, we mentioned, straight ankle locks earlier today, and you apply this to your different training partners. As you apply to that wrestler, you try it to the person who's kind of a points fighter or somebody who's got a tricky guard system. You're getting a glimpse at what that feels like against that tournament, that matchup against 4 or 5 different people. Some way you got to find a way to beat them all. So I think that's a good way. Example for me for rolling, I remember a lot of my training partners, they pass to my half guard. So I'm working a lot of times butterfly guard or some other type of guard, and they go to my half guard, and then they easily pass my half guard. My half guard is pretty much garbage. So I've changed my ideas about my own half guard, and instead of working from my half guard, I treat my half guard as somebody's halfway past my guard, and I start to try to recover my guard. I try to do that. I try to prevent that pass. What my training partners can do that would be different is to, instead of try to like pass my half guard, is to attack and try to finish from my half guard, which is, there's a lot of chokes and a few other things you could do from half guard as just attacks. I'm defending the pass. I'm trying to reset my guard, and I'm ready for that knee to come through and them try to get past that. But if they stop doing what I'm defending against and they started attacking with a submission instead of a pass, I think a lot of them would have a little bit more luck. And that's just kind of that's a conscious decision on their part if they were to make that. But same thing if you're training with somebody or you're competing and you kind of have these loops where this happens twice in the match. This happens 3 times in a match. That third time, you should do something different. And that's just adapting your plan to the situation at hand.
And I think that's a great reality check about half guard. I have the same idea. If I don't have any frames in, if I don't have any way to control distance or alleviate pressure, if I'm just on the bottom and I just happen to have one of his legs wrapped between my 2 legs, I'm playing half mounted. Yeah. You've got to have some frames in and some way to launch some offense, or you're just half mounted and getting crushed.
Yeah. And I can also just double down and get into a better half guard. I have access. Like Andre Montero, the guy who gave me my black belt, is a tremendous half guard player. I have not tapped into that resource. It's just, I think half guard, and I could be wrong on this. I'm sure I'm wrong on this on some aspects, but you got to be kind of tough. Like it's kind of a gritty process. And because I know when I'm in someone's half guard, I make them grit it out. I make it uncomfortable for them. And I don't want to be person on the bottom having to just grit out this uncomfortable, cross face and this pressure. I'd rather recover my guard. Gary, where is half guard for you on that? Are you comfortable there?
I love being half guard on the bottom. I like it. I like to switch back and forth between a butterfly hook and leg locks and kimuras come from there.
How often are you on the bottom on half guard and it's like it's more than uncomfortable?
Yeah, there's a lot of times, if I can't get up on my side and, they got a strong cross face, it's going to be uncomfortable. And there's some really strong top guys. But then I go back to, I got to change my plan. If I'm going against somebody who's really good top game and they're going to cross face the living, what out of me and flatten me out and make my life miserable, I'm going to try to use my wrestling and try to end up in a top position or like if I'm in got taken down, got passed, and start shrimping to recapture my guard, I'll go to full guard, and from full guard I'll start working from there versus going to half guard. But so yeah, I mean I like half guard, and there are times where I do get demoralized there, and that's when I just have to change the game plan.
Byron, the first time I went commercial fishing, I went 3 days on this wooden schooner that was built in the 1890s as a sailing boat, obviously, and converted to a diesel trawler. And it was miserable. It had been just docked all winter long, and this was the first trip back out in the spring. It was musty. It stank. There was no real cooking options. There was a microwave and a sink was about it, and I got seasick for 3 days straight. And got in, and the guy had told me, here's how we pay. It's at 10%, but I can't guarantee you 10%. If you go out and you get seasick, because we didn't know each other, he's like, if you just get seasick the whole time, don't work, I can't pay you. And I went out and I got seasick, and I'm like, you know what? I ain't doing this for free. So I worked, I threw up, I worked. Got in, the guy gave me my check, but he was kind of like, well, I guess that was probably it for you, huh? And I'm like, hell no, I'm going back out. I guess I'm the type of guy that likes half guard.
Oh, there you go. Seasick fisherman. Oh, that's awesome. Did the boat smell before you got on it, Joe?
Oh, it stank, and yeah, I didn't do anything to improve that.
Puking all over the place.
Oh man.
The boat smells, but it's not like a fishy smell. It's more of a puke smell. Oh, that's a good story, Joe. I appreciate that one. You got grit, man. That's for sure.
Guess.
Still on boats today sometimes.
Yep.
Moving on past the changing your game plan or changing your plan in the heat of the moment, and having the ability to do that is something you have to train for. Like, you're not just suddenly going to become somebody who's great at takedowns just because you're looking at somebody who's not that great at takedowns. Oh, I'm going to take him down. You probably should train for that in advance. At least have that up to a certain proficiency before you even try it against somebody, even with their mediocre skill that you're kind of reading. So moving on from the changing the game plans is deception, is the fourth kind of concept in chapter 1 here. And in paragraph 18, short and sweet, all warfare is based on deception. And man, that works really good for jiu-jitsu. And let you guys kind of simmer about that and think about some time that you've been tricked by somebody, or maybe a fun thing that you've done to somebody and deceived them. But imagine like defending a sweep when they're setting up an armbar. Like, you're defending the wrong thing. That's the disaster of a thing for the person who's defending that sweep. And I don't even care to sweep you. This is an armbar I'm attempting, and by the time you notice that, it's going to be too late. And I lump combination techniques under deception. It's similar, like it's a misdirection. So when you kind of throw in one or two, three things, obviously one wouldn't be a combo, but the second and the third thing, there's a bit of deception involved in that. last thing here on this, total deception is pretty difficult to deceive on a skilled opponent. I mean, that's what we're doing jiu-jitsu, not against the random person at the grocery store. We're doing jiu-jitsu against people who train jiu-jitsu. So even if I'm trying to sweep Gary, he knows that there's a possibility for that armbar there. So, like, total deception of them not having a clue, that's not what we're working with. I want to get to where I could tap out Joe with a technique, and Joe is fully understandable. He understands his technique and a bunch of the nuances behind it, and still works against him. That's amazing. And so, like, that deception isn't a brand new secret technique necessarily. It's just a little bit of misdirection. It could be a combination of techniques that they didn't expect. And those are some pretty simple ways to deceive a training partner or, an actual competition. Can you guys think of any examples of when you've been tricked, taking the bait?
I mean, it's happened so many times, and in all reality, that's what jiu-jitsu is about. We're setting traps. I may want a Kimura, and I can go straight to your arm, and I'm going for it, and then it's going to turn into a fight to see who's stronger, and we just grit out a position. But, I'm going to start attacking your head, hand fight, and I'm going to go for a Kimura from there. Or, we're just thinking 4 or 5 steps ahead. And, that's 100% what jiu-jitsu is about. But I love that part about jiu-jitsu. I can think of so many times where I've been tapped out, or I've been swept, or I've been taken down, and it's all 100% on those ones due to some sort of deception. And when I'm in the middle of the air getting taken down, or I just got swept, I got a smile on my face, because it's, even though I ended up on the losing end of that move, I respect so much the deception to get me down that path, and it's just such a great art that, when you get 2 even people, you have to start, looking for that deception to bring somebody into your wheelhouse.
Yeah, I learned something from watching boxing, listening to boxing commentators a long time ago, that I think this is how I usually get caught in jiu-jitsu. But maybe it was Teddy Atlas was talking about, one of the reasons you don't throw your hardest punches every punch you throw, not just so you don't burn yourself out, but your opponent gets used to taking them. They pity, I can take these punches, and then they're not so quick with their guard. They're not so disciplined with covering up, and then you unleash a barrage of heavy throws. And I usually have that oh shit moment, like, God dang it, where you laugh at yourself a little bit when I get swept, and my training partner has grips or hooks that I know could be problematic, but they're not really doing anything to make them problematic. Like, okay, I know he's got my sleeve, but it's not keeping me from posting. He knows what he wants to do, but he's not attempting to do it. He's not using any force until the crucial moment, and then it's like explosion. And that's what gets me. Like, I know it's not the smartest thing to do to pass when he's got this grip, but it's not affecting me in any negative way right now. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and then I'm on my back.
Yeah, that's a great example, Joe. I have an example of training, doing the technique portion of class where Jake showed a sweep. It was gi jiu-jitsu, so he's got the sweep, and you're manipulating the collar in a certain way, and hip movement is a particular way, and grips are a certain way, and then there's a sweep. It doesn't really matter what sweep it is, but that's what we were doing. So we did this for 20 minutes. We really worked this technique, and everybody got to understanding it. And then it comes time to rolling. And I'm a black belt at this time, and I match up with either a blue belt or a purple belt. I can't remember what rank he was at the time. And it's the second or third round of rolling, and he starts to get these grips. He starts to move his hips this way. I'm like, this is good. This is cool. He's starting out. He's going to do this sweep. And so I start to kind of address this, and boom, he locked in a triangle choke. Totally tricked me. And so not only was it a really good triangle, it was like a mental game that started maybe as he was drilling these techniques. He's like, there's a good opportunity for a triangle here. I wonder if Jason had mentioned that. I wonder if we're going to cover this at all. And no, he didn't. And it just was just coincidence. We never did get to that part of the setup. I had no idea that was there. And he found it there. And then he's setting it up. I'm defending the sweep, and triangle slams shut fast. And it's like that. Not only was that like a cool triangle choke, but the whole experience of being so deceived by what I thought I knew he was going to do. I know he's going to do move of the day. I get so happy when people do the move of the day on me. It's just like it shows like growth that day. And that is just so rewarding and so fun. But when he switched it up on me, and he did bonus move of the day or trick of the day, I still remember that today. I've had move of the day done a million times on me, but to have a submission come out of what I thought was a setup for a sweep, I was defending the wrong thing, and it.
Do you remember if you escaped or did you tap?
I tapped. That's part of why I remembered, because it was just like I was completely defending the sweep. That
might be the best point of this whole episode is for everybody out there listening, Byron's reaction to this whole situation. That's how you respond when you get tapped by a lower belt.
Oh, I beat him senselessly. Just kidding. I was proud of him.
But it's fun to hear the excitement in your voice when you talk about getting surprised by this. And that really should be the feeling you should have when you get caught with something. You know, don't beat yourself up. Don't get mad. But man, that's a really exciting moment especially for that guy. But Byron, you got the right attitude.
Well, thanks, Joe. Appreciate that. That was all kind of on that paragraph 18, which is a big one. All warfare is based on deception. Right after that's paragraph 19. Let's say paragraphs. They're basically sentences or lines that are just separated out. 19 is, when able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our force, we must seem inactive. When near, we must seem to make the enemy believe we are far away. When far away, we must make him think we are near. And my example for this, and if you guys want to think about it while I kind of run through my example, is guillotines. Sometimes, whether I'm on the offensive or defensive on a guillotine, you just look at it, like if they're not really applying that pressure, if they're, like you said, Joe, with that wrist control that got you the sweep, if somebody wraps up my head and they start cranking on it, I will defend the guillotine right away. But if it's kind of a loose guillotine and I'm halfway through my guard pass sequence anyway, and I don't feel like it's going to be much, sometimes I kind of ignore that thing. And it doesn't really feel tight. But all the while, this guy has got a really good guillotine, and I'm kind of just marching right into this thing. But until he's set up where his legs are where he wants them to be, and where his other hand is in a good spot, or wherever they want to take this guillotine, then they apply the pressure, and it tightens super fast. And I'm not just like in a choke, but I'm stuck. I got distracted, and like, I'm not saying this as a particular example, but like of a situation. This happens to people all the time. You think that you're not in a tight choke, and they're just they're just addressing the little side schemes of the choke. Like, okay, usually when I do this choke, they do this. So let's take that away first, and then apply the choke. And so getting your neck wrapped up may not be the most scary thing in the world, like this is for sure a tight guillotine. But if you ignore it and they have a good guillotine, they might just be kind of, able to attack when they seem unable. They might seem like they're close when they're actually far, or they might seem like the choke is far away and it's actually pretty close to happening. Does that make sense as an example on what Sun Tzu was saying there?
Yeah, it's perfect. And I think it applies to almost all submissions. Once you launch your go-to submission, then your training partner, your opponent kind of knows that's what you're going to try. And if it fails the first time, they'll be that much more ready for it the next time. If you go for a real sloppy armbar attempt from guard and you don't really have control of their posture, their arm, and they just pull out of it, you got to be 10 times as good at controlling all those things the next time you go for it, because now they know that's your intention. Same thing with that guillotine. I don't see too many guillotines set up from the guard anymore, it seems like. Most of the time I see them, it's from a headlock type position and a scramble, and then the person, scoots into a guard position to finish it. And I think you're right. If you're in turtle and your opponent sort of starts to get that headlock in, and it's easy sometimes to ignore it. And if you're the one sinking that headlock in and you try and slide into guard too soon and they pop their head out, the next time you're in that same position, you're going to have to work twice as hard to get that set up.
Yeah, good expanding of my example, Joe. I appreciate that. So that's kind of talking to seem like you can't attack when you can, or one thing like a little bit like that's bait. And chapter 5 talks a lot about setting bait for people and getting them to take that hook and setting the hook, and Joe's a fisherman on a commercial level and vomit. So that would be later. If you want to learn more about tricking an opponent by using bait, skip ahead to chapter 5, and it's all going to be there. It's interesting stuff as well. So to wrap up chapter 1, unless you guys want to jump in with anything else that we need to be expanded on, taking the silence as a no. We skip on down to paragraph 26. And Sun Tzu says, the general who loses a battle makes but few calculations beforehand. Thus, do many calculations lead to victory and few calculations to defeat? How much more no calculation at all? It is by attention to this point that I can foresee who is likely to win or lose. And he's just really just saying the general who plans out stuff is more likely to win than the generals who do not plan out stuff. And I could just think, so I started training, like the whole COVID thing, I was mostly just training with my wife, and now I'm basically back to training since people are getting their vaccines, and it's a lot safer, I feel. I don't know. But and I matched up with one guy, and I said, anything you're working on? And he said, I'm straight ankle locks. And then he said this particular leg entanglement. And I go, oh, how's that going? He goes, pretty good. I've been working on it for 6 months. And I was like, and the guy's a blue belt. I'm like, this is going to be a tough role. Like, he has a plan. And so sure enough, we waded right into that part of his game, and he was very skilled in that. And just having that plan and doing, like Gary was saying, the work on the plan and having access to that. But granted, I'll give access. If you want to work on something, Joe or Gary, I'm happy to go in there and work on it with you, knowing full well that it's going to be me getting tapped more often than not. But it's just, he had access to it as well. He could get there on his own. If it's hard to shut that sort of thing down if he's been working for 6 months to get there, and he's got good follow-ups and good counterattacks, and he's got combinations as well. And it's just far better. Your learning will go a lot easier. And for me, the enjoyment is higher if I have a plan. If I walk into class and I have nothing on my agenda for rolling or improvement, it's still a fun time. I still enjoy jiu-jitsu. I still will do some great techniques, I hope. What great is limited to per the person, and mine's probably somewhat average. But if I come in there with a mission, I want to do this. This is a sweep. This is the pass I'm working on now. To me, it's more enjoyable. And then the idea that to pick the things that you're going to work on next are things that fit well with the things you're already good at or things that you want to be good at. That's putting the whole game plan together. And I can't advocate it strongly enough, even if you're not a competitor. It's just more enjoyable to be good at this. And having a game plan helps you be good at it. And, even if you're just, rolling with your friends on the mat and not ever have a plan of competing, it is much more enjoyable, I feel, if you have a game plan and you're able to see it work sometimes. It won't work always. That's just how jiu-jitsu is. It's really tough.
Byron, they talk about the general loses, makes but few calculations. Says thus do many calculations that lead to victory and calculations to defeat. And we talk about calculations, but they have to be good calculations. You can't be overconfident. You can't. I can go back to Custer. Custer just felt, hey, we're gonna just ride in there and just destroy people, and everybody knows what happened to him. I think you can do a ton of calculations, but you have to be honest with those calculations. You have to have good data. In the work world today, one of the big things you see is data analytics. We've got a bunch of customers, but what do we know about them? We need to, have really good information to make those calculations, and we have to do it with a clean head. We can't just think, hey, because I train with Byron and Joe, I'm a superstar, and everything's going to work for me.
Yeah, that would be a mistake for sure.
So I think
big mistake.
Yeah.
So we just talked about this idea of having a plan, basically, and developing that, and the benefits of jiu-jitsu. If you guys have thought of anything off the mats as far as a game plan goes, it would be kind of fun to hear that. While you guys kind of think about that and simmer on that, if this has been a fun episode, if you've learned anything about jiu-jitsu, chapter 2 would be waging war, and Sun Tzu it's definitely different than what we just covered. It talks about, the costs of war, and we could talk about the cost of jiu-jitsu. It talks about the benefits of the war. How is this going to benefit the country or the state that you're fighting for? And so we talk about the benefits of competing or doing jiu-jitsu, and talks about the timing of when to wage the war, and and that sort of thing. So it would be a different chapter, but if you guys are interested in this strategic aspect of jiu-jitsu, when to do jiu-jitsu or when to compete, aka like when to wage war, is what Sun Tzu was talking about. We could bring that in maybe next month, and so let us know kind of your thoughts on this, the Art of War. We covered the first chapter today. If you guys have enjoyed it, we'll be happy to do it again. And if it's kind of a flop and didn't get anything out, let us know that as well, and we'll see where we go with this in the future. Like, you guys are part of this as well. So for me, does anybody want to go first about bringing this game plan thing off the mats?
You go ahead first, then I can make a calculation and see what I'm thinking of.
You can fix what I say. How about that? That'd be nice. So, Joe, you're a professional. I don't even know how to describe what you do. You said fisherman, but that's not. You're a guy a mariner, right?
Mariner. That's the term most commonly used.
That's a more broad term, which would be fishing or oil work or any. So that's cool.
Yes.
Joe is or Gary's in the banking business, and I'm a firefighter. And I look at this game plan thing, and it's all over the place. It could be from how we train our recruits. Like, here's the game plan. You get to a place, it's on fire. You're going to do these steps. You're going to put your gear on this particular way. You're going to do this. And it takes away a lot of the nerves, and the error rate goes down if we have a game plan about, like, the first initial actions. Depending on the type of fire, you're going to do these actions, or if it's this type of fire, you do these actions. It makes it a lot easier. Another big part of the game plan stuff is getting around and looking at the buildings, looking at if we're in a house, if we go to Gary's house for some reason, I'm going to kind of just look around his house and say, okay, if this was on fire, would I find these stairs okay if it was totally dark? Or, how is this house set up? Because neighborhoods are kind of set up the same way a lot of times. So just kind of getting a lay of the businesses that you're in. So we'll get in. We kind of have sections we work at in Wichita, of the city, but you could work anywhere in the city, but you are normally in your area, and to know those buildings is really important. And if I'm not in my area, I hope, and in many times the case, that the employees, the members there that call that area home, know those buildings really well. And that's really helpful. That's part of that game plan. Know the buildings. and just kind of putting in that work beforehand, before the alarm comes out, whether it's a fire or it's a medical call or it's a shooting or whatever. Like, having that game plan in play makes stuff a lot better. It makes it run smoother. It makes us better at our job. It makes us faster. It makes our communications go better because we all know what the other one's thinking usually. And so I can't advocate for it enough. On my job is getting that game plan, having those conversations, and like, what are we like when I go to a different station that's not with my normal crew, we'll have a couple of conversations about, okay, on a house fire, like, what are you guys thinking on this? Okay, you guys use this particular strategy. Okay, cool. How about on a car accident where somebody's pinned? This is the game plan. Just kind of get on the same page, and then when that happens at 3 a.m., it goes really smoothly. So just laying that game plan down, it's all over the place. I could talk about this forever for many things, but it just pays dividends in the future. So, Joe.
well, let me say first that I like that you ended with it pays dividends in the future, because oftentimes what you're doing might not appear to have any benefit now, and that's not necessarily why you're doing it, but it'll pay in the future.
Yeah, and I was going to say, dividends aren't really paid in the past.
Yeah. Yep. Now, I was thinking about the role that I currently play at work. You know, I was a commercial fisherman for years, and then I was the captain on oil boats for years, and for the last 7 years, I've been in the safety department at work. And part of my job, unfortunately, hasn't been a big part lately, but part of my job is to be involved in post-incident, post-accident investigations, and to identify root causes and contributing factors and figure out how to prevent incidents from reoccurring. And early on, I noticed that when you're reading incident reports, almost always like complacency will be listed as one of the factors. And it's like, yeah, that just sounds like a cop-out. What is complacency? And I heard a definition that I like and that I currently use anytime I'm looking at any kind of a post-incident accident. Before I get into it, I'll tell you about an incident we had a few years ago. Pretty simple, and complacency was a part of it. We had a new class of boat out, and the captain that was on the boat had been on it for a few months and was familiar with it, and he was training up another captain to run the boat. And each boat handles differently, depending on the horsepower, depending on the pitch of the wheel, depending on the hull design, the size, the weight. I mean, there's so many factors that go into it. So you can be very proficient at running a boat and then switch to another boat, and you've got quite a bit to learn. And typically what will happen when we're maneuvering around the port, you're maneuvering these 250, 300-foot ships in tight spaces between other ships, and you have wind and current to deal with. And where you're standing when you're driving the boat, there's always enough room for somebody else to be standing there with you. And you can position yourself as the trainer in a position where, hey, buddy, if you start to run into trouble, I'm just going to ask you to step forward. You'll be out of my way. I'm going to take control. And then as you get comfortable, you'll move further and further away. And towards the end of the person's training, you'll be 15 feet away. You might be sitting down at the computer doing stuff. And in this particular case, that was sort of where they were at. And the guy driving the boat gave it too much throttle, got the stern moving too quickly, and then was unfamiliar with the controls and how to, get the boat moving the other direction quick enough to avoid hitting the dock. Did, I don't know, $10,000, $15,000 worth of damage to the dock, and the boat had a pretty good dent in it. And so when we're doing the investigation and we're talking to the captain who was training the other guy, and, you were a long ways away from where the guy was. And you were not in a position to step in and take control immediately if something happened. Well, here's the definition of complacency that I like. It's our underestimating of what could go wrong and our overestimating of our ability to deal with it. And that certainly was the case with this captain. He really didn't think anything could go wrong at this point. He thought the other captain knew what was going on, and he thought he could just yell commands from where he was at. Hey, just give it throttle with the starboard engine. And And I think that that's important with our jiu-jitsu. One of Sun Tzu's points, Byron, was, or one of your points was, does your game plan put you in an advantageous position, or can it make the game advantageous for you? And I think it's important, especially if you're a leg locker or you're a guard player, to always kind of know what's the worst that could possibly happen if get my guard passed or whatever, and do I have a plan to deal with it? So that's my off the mat lesson as it relates to whatever.
That's interesting, Joe. It's a whole other world out there that I don't know anything about. Training another person how to control a ship. So pretty wild.
It's hard for me to even explain how complex it is, but it's not an easy task.
You don't just step on the gas and foot off the brake at the same foot, two pedals. Here's about the clutch.
The learning curve might be similar to like learning how to drive a big rig. If you've seen people back up a single trailer and then back up a double trailer, man, yeah. And I guess the similarity is that if you're trying to back up a double trailer, once it starts getting out of whack, I've seen guys fight and struggle trying to get it back in line. And that's kind of how driving a boat is. Once you start losing it, things can start going wrong quick. Wow.
That's because I could visualize the semi truck with two and getting that off, and man, that's a good visual, Joe.
Definitely good visual, Joe.
Gary, what do you got for us for off the mat lane plans?
Well, I'm going to go back to a maritime deal here with Joe. Has nothing to do with me, but my buddy out in San Diego is a big time fisherman, and here not too long ago he caught one of the biggest tunas on the West Coast this year. Made it in all sorts of magazines all over the internet, and even our buddy, one of our listeners, Joe Russo down there in San Diego, actually sent me a picture of it because he saw it online or in one of his magazines out there. I'm not a big fisherman, but my buddy is, and this goes back to the calculations and the deception. I was talking to my buddy about how to catch a tuna that big, and I guess there's fishing websites and tracking the temperature of the water and everything, and doing your research, knowing what type of water, temperature and depth and all sorts of things where you're going to find, these big tuna. He's got to make a ton of calculations, and he said, he was going out, following information and, going out every week and, changing calculations a little bit, to exactly where they needed to be on the GPS. And he just, every week he would make a couple more calculations and, just narrow it down. And then, based off of all that data analytics, he finally, hit the big one day. And it was just crazy when he was telling me about how, I thought basically you just jump into a boat, you turn it on and you drive out. Hey, this looks like a good area, with my limited fishing knowledge. But, there is so much into it. And, the deception, having, good lures or whatever to the calculations without putting in the work, without doing your homework, he would have never, been able to catch that fish.
Yeah, Gary, how many people you think sort of stumbled across that story and they're just casual fishermen or they're not really fishermen? And how many people you think thought, man, you want to talk about getting lucky? Boy, that guy was at the right spot at the right time.
Yeah, that's so true, Joe. And I've thought about that. And, when me and this guy lived together in New York, I am no fisherman whatsoever. But he would take me out onto Lake Ontario, Lake Oneida Lake, which is a lake out there. And, man, you wouldn't believe all these walleye and everything I'd catch because I followed what he said to do me. I mean, or he said what to do. We go back to, you guys were talking about good instructors. I had a good instructor, but he always put in that time to do research, knew where to fish, and honed it down. And when I went with him, I felt like a great fisherman. Now I go out to my pond in my neighborhood there, and I can't catch anything. Just because I don't put that time in, I don't do the research. I'm not a professional. And same thing with jiu-jitsu. If I want to get good at jiu-jitsu, I've got to put the work in. I've got to study it. I've got to have that deception. But yeah, it really just blew me away when he was telling me how long he was looking for that fish. It kind of reminds me of Moby Dick. He had his goal set, for a couple years to catch a fish that size. And, he wasn't going to quit. He was going to keep changing his game plan till he got it narrowed down to where he needed to be.
I don't think Moby Dick went well.
Yeah, I'm not sure Moby did put a lot of work into it, but I think Captain Ahab did.
Yeah. And I mean, it ain't always going to go well, but it's just like jiu-jitsu. We're not going to win every day. We could have the attitude of, that guy Byron went against and get mad and quit, or we can put more work into it, hone, narrow our focus down and get it done.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned that again, Gary. Like that guy, tapping out somebody who was frustrated repeatedly is probably not the right thing. I don't know if he maybe roughed up another couple of white belts beforehand or what got into me either. But what I would do now would not be that. It would be talk to the guy. Like a lot of times that's the wrestling mentality is if you can do something, do it. And in your training partners are also you're competing for that spot on the team to go out there and compete. And that's not at all what jiu-jitsu is. This is more of a team environment. We're trying to build each other up. And and I don't know if he quit for sure, but I can't remember who he is, so that doesn't look well for that he stuck around.
Byron knows one of my longtime training partners who doesn't train anymore, which it's not due to anything bad attitude or anything, but. He was 285 pounds, 300 pounds, and more athletic than me, could outrun me. He's 500-600 pound bench press. And I'm not just saying that. I'm dead serious. That's what his bench press was.
Yep.
And he would, toy with me. And there were times I would be that way too. Like I remember times he would tap me and I'd slap the mat and, cuss, and then I would jump right back in it. And, it was my ego taking over that somebody was tapping me out that quick and, making a fool of me. And, it's hard sometimes. And I remember one time, probably 4 or 5 times in a row, he'd tap me out every 30 seconds and I'd slap the mat, cuss, and then jump right back on him. And he was a good training partner where after a couple times he's like, hey, perfect, let's switch partners. He knew that pretty soon I was probably going to storm out of that place or start throwing punches. Me and him, we were good buddies, so we would go at it, and I would always come out on the short stick. But, it happens. There's days where we're all not our best, and, he's a good training partner because he recognized that, and after he had a little bit of fun with me, he stopped it before I lost it. And, I do appreciate that. When I look back at it, I realize what he did to keep me on the straight and narrow.
Nice. So we've heard a couple of examples about how this chapter laying plans can be taken off the mat. We want to hear your guys' examples. You can send them to bjjbrick@gmail.com. The easier place to comment publicly would be on the YouTube channel. So this I'm saying this a bunch of times. This episode is published through an RSS feed, like any other podcast you listen to. You could download it and listen to it. It's also just published as a YouTube video. There's no video behind it really, but the audio file is put on YouTube and you can listen to it there. Nobody really goes there to listen to the episode. Like, it's just more of a place to store it just in case. And maybe somebody YouTube searches for Art of War and BJJ and it pops up or something like that. But there's a comment section there. You could comment and say, hey, I relate this to my work or my jiu-jitsu in this way. That'd be really cool to see your guys' response. I want to know about how laying plans has affected your work environment, or how it's affected your jiu-jitsu in a positive or negative way, for whatever. So if you want to comment, you could just email to us and we'll see that. Or you could actually also find our Facebook fan page and comment there. I think by saying that, I think that we're old. Like, we're not real big in the new social medias. But we have a Facebook fan page. You could comment there and we'll all see it. Email it to me and I'll share it with the guys at bjjbrick@gmail.com, or comment on the YouTube channel. What episode was this, Joe?
300.
Yep, 368. Comment on that video of your experiences with laying plans on or off the mat. We want to hear it. That'd be kind of fun. We are listener supported. We have you can buy the audiobook. There's a couple of them actually, or you can support us on Patreon. New Patreon supporters get a 5-inch BJJ Brick gi patch and a sticker if you put your email address in or your actual address. I'm having trouble here. Address on Patreon. I send that stuff out, and I want to give a big thanks to Jamie. Last month, I kind of mentioned that clearly we went from a weekly podcast to a monthly podcast, and most of our Patreon supporters are supporting us on a per episode basis. They pitch in like $1, and that's awesome. But if that's 4 episodes, sometimes even 5 episodes a month, that's a lot different than 1 episode a month. And I mentioned that the kind of the revenue and like the cost of running a website is still the same. The cost of hosting podcasts are still the same, but the revenue has definitely went down just because of we're producing less, and that's perfectly fine as far as we're doing less and producing less of this content. But Jamie went on there and she increased her pledge, and that when I got that message, I was like, man, I love Jamie for that. Like, what a pat on the back, or just a token of support. Like, hey, keep it up, and that was really encouraging to get that from her. So anyway, thank you, Jamie. I wanted to call you out on here for doing that. And just a heads up, if you are that weekly supporter and you're pledging $1, and it used to be $4 a month or something like that, you could increase your pledge and then cap it at 1 episode per month. You have the ability to do that. So if by chance I put out another episode this month, Jamie didn't just spend more than she wanted to, you could always put a limit on which you're able to send towards the podcast. So heads up on that, Jamie, in case we happen to produce more than an episode a month. But definitely appreciate your increased contribution and the digital pat on the back. We appreciate you, Jamie.
And Byron, Gary, and I both appreciate that even though the revenues have gone down, you haven't changed our pay a bit. So thank you.
Nice.
Yeah, it is always nice to receive absolutely nothing. We appreciate it, Byron.
Well, we bring it.
Yeah, we are hoping the $15 an hour minimum wage passes. So, yeah, we can actually afford to eat there.
Man,
podcasting problems. So, you guys are making me laugh. That's a good one, Joe. And Gary, well, I'm keeping my eye on that minimum wage, and if we're not back next week, they got us.
Or next month.
What's that, Joe? Gary?
Next month.
Next month. That's right. Yeah. Monthly. So check us out on social media. We'd love to hear your guys' comments about this laying plans. Till next week, stay sweaty, my friends.
And don't forget to shower.
Train hard, train smart, make good plans and stick to them, and you'll get better. We'll see you on the mats, guys.
Nice.
Thank you for listening. I hope you find the time today to roll. After all, the best way to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You can visit our website at bjjbrick.com for more good times. Swing by and like our Facebook page. Our email is bjjbrick@gmail.com.